Welcome to Black Man Lab Results. We are live on Wednesday, December 8th. We are in the month of Christmas already. This year is flying like nobody's business. But we are excited and exceptionally happy to be back because the past couple of weeks we've been off just because we've had so much other stuff going on. But we are back and, like I like to say, badder than ever. So we're gonna have a great conversation tonight, talking about our Black Man Lab live session from this past Monday, which was around knowing your spiritual self. And when I tell you that room on Monday, it was like church, if you will. It was a spirit in that room that I cannot begin to describe, but we'll try to give you that feeling tonight as we talk. Tonight I have my partner in crime back with me for first time in a long time. My partner Joe Barker is with me tonight. Joe, how you doing, brother?
Man, I'm good. It's glad to be here. You know, it's like we knew that topic on Monday night was going to bring the smoke. It did. It last time we had the conversation, it was the same thing. You know, we had people changing religions. I mean, it's so powerful, man, when we talk about it because, in my opinion, it's at the foundation of all that we do. You know, those of us that are advocating for community, for youth, for people of color, for justice, educators, attorneys, you know, every aspect of what we do, the one common denominator amongst all of us is that spiritual foundation that drives us to do these things, man. So I knew it was going to be a powerful session as it always is, man, but definitely glad to be back. I'll be off the road for a few weeks here until, you know, all the students get back in session, but definitely glad to be back with you, brother.
Man, we're so glad to have you on Monday. Glad to have you tonight. I'm also glad to have our other brother, one of our other board members of Black Man Lab, who actually served as a panelist. Let me rewind the tape on that. A powerful panelist on Monday for the subject, and that's my brother Jarrod Grant. Jarrod, how you doing, bro?
I'm good, Black man. How y'all doing? Good to see y'all, brothers.
Man, good to
Man,
be
long
seen.
time no see.
I know.
Right. So before we get started, again, Black Man Lab started roughly a little over 4 years ago now, which started by some fathers that got together. One of which is one of our co-founders is Mauli Davis, and three other brothers that got together, Jarrod included, to talk to their sons, have some different voices for their sons other than their own. We know as fathers of sons, quite often our sons tune us out, but they'll listen to an uncle, they'll listen to a godfather, a close friend. Heck, sometimes they'll listen to anybody other than us. We know that, right? So that's what it started from, and what those brothers did was they brought in people that were experts from different walks of life to talk to the young men, and just see what their interests were. Well, that grew from that small group to, prior to the pandemic, we had over 250 Black men meeting every week at the Andrew Walter YMCA to discuss different topics every week. And we alternate professional development to self-development every other week. And that's what the Black Man Lab grew to. So we keep this online presence so that folks that are outside of the Atlanta area can tune in and find out what we've been talking about. And we also want to make sure that we're delving a little bit deeper into the conversation that we had with our panelists, if we can, here in this space. So that's why we have our brother Jarrod here, because he was one of our panelists on this past Monday. So that's where we're at. Before we get started, brothers, we know what we do every week. We bring the ancestors into the space. And here in Lab Results, we do a very simple, what we call libation, and that is to call on the ancestors. So all we do here is we just pick one ancestor, each of us. We raise a fist and we call their name. So I'm going to ask you two brothers to join me, and we're going to call on an ancestor to bring them into this space, somebody that would be really, really pleased with us doing this kind of work, us, pushing forward our community. So if y'all can with me, raise your fist, and on three, we're just gonna call a name. 1, 2, 3.
Bill
Sylvester
Martin.
Williams.
Alana.
Ashe.
Ashe.
So that's what we do. We want to make sure that those who stand before us, are looking down. A great cloud of witnesses are looking down and happy with this work that we're doing. So without further ado, I want to get into the conversation. I'm going to ask my brother Jarrod to introduce himself, and then we'll get into the conversation about what we talked about on Monday. Brother Jarrod.
All right. Good evening, brothers, and everyone out there, brothers, sisters. My name is Jarrod Grant. I hail in Atlanta, Georgia. I am adjunct professor at Clark Atlanta University. I'm working on my dissertation, all in political science. I've been working in African spirituality and the origins of religion and these topics and subjects since the early 90s, if you will. And so this topic is very near and dear to me. And I look forward to continuing this topic as we discuss it tonight.
Yeah, and to your point, Jarrod, is deep and as rich as the conversation was Monday. We really only touched the surface of it, right? Yes, and I think that's going to be an ongoing theme with us with the Black Man Lab, is that there's going to be certain subjects that we have to revisit with some regularity because of their level of importance to our community. So give me real quick, what were your thoughts on Monday? What were your thoughts on from kind of the outset, the start of it?
I thought that it was powerful that, first of all, for the last few weeks, a couple months, the spirit has been really high in the Black Man Lab. I mean, extremely high. And, we did some reformation with these circles and these half circles that now just spread out even further. And it's really energizing the room, it's the space, the energy between the brotherhood. It's just really there and extremely infectious. The other piece is you had three different spiritual systems on the stage, and I think we were all in one accord. You may have three different paths to our spiritual understanding for the most part, or really more so practice. Our understanding, I think, is on par, very similar. But you had a brother, an elder who practices Islam. You had a brother who practices Christianity. And then you had me, of course, who's practices in African spirituality. And so but our discussion was very universal around and Catholic, and that's for you, Joe. It was very Catholic discussion, universal discussion on spirituality. So,
hey, Joe, I didn't tell anybody, but I fall in that too. Hey, Jarrod, believe it or not, what you know of me now. Back when I was graduating 8th grade, I almost went to seminary.
Wow.
I was almost right there with you, bro. That would have been a different seminary.
For sure. Sorry, go ahead, brother.
And that was it. I thought those were the energy of the space has been very special. The energy on Monday was just another Monday of added energy and special energy. And then the fact that we had three different spiritual systems that were very universal and similar in our expression and discussion. I thought that was strong.
Yeah, I wanna say something about that, because I don't, Marty, you really have done a great job of whether it's the online space, what we're doing Wednesdays, or when you and Maui are up there on Mondays. man, you just do a great job of just really bringing our panelists into the conversation of what we're talking about and creating the panel. You know, we all the board members help out with that, man, but you really are doing a good job facilitating that. And I was like looking at it like, I wanted to give you credit. Like, did you really get like Islam, a Catholic, like, did you really put all that together up there? Like, did you really? But I'm like, I think that's just your anointing, man, that like, the diversity of what we had on that stage there was so amazing, man. And it was really what was needed, because when I looked out in that crowd, there were so many different perspectives. Even the young brother that asked the question, you know, he kind of wanted some smoke. You know, you could tell by his question. He's like, well, I'm Ifa and da 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 da. Like he came with wanting it, but like, you know, Baba Jihad and you guys answered that so thoroughly and really diffused any differences and really made it more about how much we have in common, man. And I was just so impressed with the panel itself and the questions and how y'all answered them and how you all brought it back down to our similarities and how we are together instead of our differences, because that's so often what we see in this world. It was really impressive, man.
Yeah, I think that you know, it's really easy when you know the people, right? Even though, you know, people have different you know, practices, because I think that that's the key. You were just kind of touching about on it there, Jarrod. Is people have different practices, but the spirituality piece of it can be pretty much the same, right? And that was what kind of showed from not kind of, it's what showed from the panel. Three different perspectives as it relates to the practice / religions that are followed, but the spirituality piece of it is basically the same. And you all proved that time and again, even as questions were asked and how you all were able to answer them. And I think, you know, one of the things that I do all the time whenever we, you know, as I'm moderating or help to moderate, is that I'm always watching the audience. And I like to see how people respond to stuff. And I think Monday was one of the first times that I saw, now there's different people that always pull out pen and paper, but I saw cats pulling out their phone, taking notes, you know, some people writing with the different gems that were being dropped, because those gems were kind of across the board. None of you guys, there was nothing contradictory said between the three of you all. But the perspectives were just from each of your given practices, which I thought was beautiful. So again, Joe, I deserve nothing on that. That's all these dudes.
Like I said, man, it's an anointing, man. It's that the foundation of who you are and who we are, what we're trying to do has been able to continue to put that in place, man. And Jarrod, I wanted to unpack a couple things with you. So on Monday, we definitely delved into a lot more of the commonalities, you know, the spirituality and so forth. And a lot of times when you were given the opportunity to go into some of the background, you know, you would answer it with some of the historical context, which is always powerful, but we couldn't really get into it too much because, you know, everybody was answering. And one of the things I like about Wednesday nights is we get to dig into the depth of what some of the panelists were talking about. So I wanted you, if you could just, you know, again, we don't, like Marty said, we don't really need to know everybody's background because we know you so well, but I do like some of the background context that you were giving with respect to our spirituality, where it came from, some of the differences, some of what was taken, stolen, changed, modified. I would love for you to kind of unpack some of that, man, and speak on that in a little bit more detail or in depth.
Yeah, so when we deal with, for example, African origins of spirituality or African origins of religion, it begins, all religion, because of all humanity, began in Africa. And so when you had a continuity of people growing and evolving in a particular understanding and a way of understanding, it matures and evolves itself into these systems, or a system for the most part. And so as it began to evolve and African people began to migrate out, they took their system, and it flourished in other parts of the world. And so you get one of the first civilizations of Ethiopia. You have a old cultural spiritual system. You have its great granddaughter known as Kemet that begins this. Kemet, also known now as Egypt. The Greek name for Egypt is Egypt. That's Greek for Egypt, but we called it Kemet. And the Kamites, which was us, were the people, and they created a spiritual system as well. That's what we did. That's what we do as African people. So African origins of humanity, African origins of spirituality, also meant the African origins of religion. And so we flourished. When we went to India, we flourished in the Indus Valley in creating those systems. And one of the oldest systems was there before the others came and invaded and replaced the Upanishad with the Vedic system. And so we see the same with, Islam. We think Islam is thousands of years old. It's not very old. And there's an Ethiopian who was one of the progenitors of Islam by the name of Bilal. And so the mythology or the text, the context of its beginning begins with an African man who even Muhammad said comes from the most spiritual place on earth, was utilized in order to create the system of Islam. And this was given to those people we know as Arabs. And Muhammad always spoke highly, even in the Quran, speaks highly of Ethiopia, extremely high. And so there's a reason for that. When we talk about Christianity, the origins of Christianity begin in Kemet. Most of, if not all, your text really comes out of the papyrus, all of the literature, the literary corpus of ancient Kemet. And so you can draw many of the stories right out of that. But you had different sects that would create their own systems. And as Egypt was invaded, you had others trying to empower themselves. And then so stories get kind of changed around and, get bastardized or they just change. And so you had a renegade group that created the system of Christianity, but it comes from Kemet. And so the first 300 years of Christianity is known as the Coptic religion, which we find in Ethiopia. All of the artifacts that are famous in Christianity are in Ethiopia, even to this day. And so, but around 325 AD, you get another group of people, the Romans, also known as Europeans, who began to have conferences and make some changes to that version.
Marty, you saw how Jarrod threw that shot. I saw your face, Marty. You saw how Jarrod threw that shot. Jarrod's like, I don't know who's listening, so I'm gonna just say, also known as Europeans.
Right.
We know what you wanted to say, bro. Go ahead, Jarrod.
Yeah.
Given his also known as is.
Right.
But we have the Conference of Nicaea where we know names, dates, places, everything was changed. And Catholicism, as you know, is really a huge replica of Kemetic symbolism, Kemetic everything that the Pope wears is what a pharaoh was wearing, for the most part. And so we know where these stories actually emanate from. And then we know what books were taken out, like the Book of Mary, for example, and other books that were taken out of during that time of the so-called Bible, for the most part. But all religion and spiritual systems, ancient systems, they begin with us, And once you know the origins, and this is what I was speaking about on Monday, when we know the origins of all of these religions, and we look at the origins of the original systems, then you're able to see all of the systems. You're able to see all of the religions. And you're able to critique them in a very factual, logical, and truthful manner. And it hurts feelings. It does hurt feelings as a result, but it is what it is. But the bottom line is Black people, African people are unique in this world. We created spiritual systems. We created a spiritual society, and our societies, our cultures are heavily spiritually based. And so we brought about a certain type of humanity for culture that people had to behave and treat each other in a particular way. When we came to the Americas in chains, on these ships, the brutality that came about us, what did we do? We still brought humanity. We humanized America. We humanized democracy. It is in our DNA to humanize and spiritualize any system. Now, some people are going to look at those who have been people who have been, cut down to the most oppressive state. We were made into this concept called niggas, which took away everything from us. And so those who go about killing and doing all of these unspiritual practices and things as well, or don't do these things based upon a spiritual principle, these things were taken away from us. This is what we, in some respects, what we became because of the folks that took us behaved and acted in these ways as well. And so wherever we go, even in Islam, we're the most spiritual. In Christianity, we're the most spiritual. I don't care what the religion is, you're going to find us at the center. And what Dr. John Henry Clarke would always state, we out Pope the Pope, we out Muhammad. We believe things exactly what they say they are when you provide us or give us another religion. And we want to be inside of a religious, and not really religious, but a spiritual system. It's in our original DNA, and it had been with us for thousands upon hundreds of thousands of years, I would dare say.
And it's interesting that you articulate that way, because you can see some very clear parallels in our society where that spiritual piece is taking a left turn, if you will, because folks are following other people's thought processes / ideologies. And there's always this conflict with it too, right? Because you can see people that have, within our own societies that have taken that left turn. In other words, have done wrong, right? Or not living as my grandmother used to say, you ain't living right, right? But it's because they have that disconnect, because it's hard. I forgot which of you guys on Monday, was it you or Matt, that had pointed out I think it was you that said, my spirit won't allow me to do certain things, right? And that's the piece that I'm trying to figure out. What do we do in our communities to draw that back into, particularly our young men, our young folks. I shouldn't just say young men, but our young folks, period. Because once you have that in you, and you see it in some of our young folks, even within the Black Man Lab, that have that level of, you can tell, spirituality about themselves. What do we do to draw that back into them? And that's what I was working on as we were talking on Monday, because the spirit of that room was so strong. I'm like, how do we get this to everybody? How do we get this to all of our folks? Right. And I'm posing that question to both of y'all. I know it's it's one of those that you probably can't answer completely. But
No, I got a good answer for that, you know, and I spoke a little bit to it the other day. And when we say spirituality or we say spirit, let's reframe the word. Let's change the word. And I told you that let's change the word to energy. And so if you just change it to energy, it does something. It begins to start this a paradigm shift, if you will. Because now you're saying, okay, so I'm energy. We're talking about energy. What's my energy between you and I? What's our energy, Marty, on the basketball court?
Sure.
You see, so we're trying to understand the energy. We're also always trying to upgrade the energy if we can, trying to be in the zone. Regardless of what we're doing, we want to be in the zone. Black Man Lab has been in the zone. You see what I'm saying? And so, because it's been in an energy. And so what we did was try to heighten the energy in our culture. And so it was, culture basically means cultivate. We're trying to cultivate our energy, and we're also trying to assign what type of energy do you have versus the type of energy that I have versus the energy that she has, he has. We have to be honest that the Creator has created an assortment of energies. And at this rawest level, earth, water, fire, air. Some people are more airy. Some people are more earthy. Some people are more fire. Some people are more water, emotional. All of these, emotional, aggressive, passionate. So we began to change the words. But we're still talking about energy. And this energy has principles tied to it. If I talk about aggression, or if I talk about passion, amongst the Yoruba, who practice Ifa. Their spiritual system is Ifa. Their creator is known as Olodumare. And they have an energy frequency by the name of Shango. And that Shango energy, which is an anthropomorphic, which means it's embodied in human form, especially in their mythology, to begin to describe this thing called charisma, passion, energy, fire. It has more diplomacy. It has a leadership quality to it. And they will say this person has all of that inside of them. And then so the culture then does what? It recognizes that early on, after you're born, to say, oh, Shango has returned. And they give you a curriculum that helps bring that quality out. Remember, we talked about education a few weeks ago. And education deals with, it's a Latin word that deals with tying you back. You already came here with certain knowledge. And it's just pulling the knowledge that's already within you. So you're trying to return to something, to the source. And not to harm anybody's minds, but we're trying to return because we are all the sons and daughters of creation.
Right. Now,
not just one person, it's all of us. And it's about how do we all bring creation out of us? That's what we're here for.
So one thing I want to offer also, and if my internet is bad, if I'm going in and out, whatever, man.
You're doing good. You're straight.
You're good.
Y'all move on without me. When you have such a highly educated Negro like Jarrod Grant, I mean, I'm gonna just be me, man. I can't be nobody but me. I ain't understand half what that brother just said. He too smart for me, man. And I'm educated, doggone it. But let me say this, man. Like, I mean, in all seriousness, I understand exactly what he was saying, And Marty, your point is how do we get that to our youth, right? And so what my low level understanding of that and how I, kind of do what I do in the space I'm in is this energy. It's exactly like he said. Let's change that word around, this energy. And the thing that I saw the three brothers do on Monday night, which was so awesome, is they made sure they related that energy, that spirituality to our culture, or the universe that surrounds us, about creation. And so it all is plugged into the same thing. into who we are in our community. When Jarrod said that Monday, I was like, man, me and my sister been cracking up on this for a while. There's certain things that I cannot do. Stealing, certain things I can't do. Now I've done it, but that karma hits me immediately. It ain't a matter of, oh man, I gotta what? No. There's certain things in my life that when I do it, karma gets me immediately. And that's just the universe telling me, no, you know better. Your consciousness is developed at a little bit higher level. So you're not supposed to do that. So stay in tune with your consciousness because we're going to make you stay in tune. So when you take it to that consciousness of that energy, well, guess what? That's what, I won't say all our youth, but so many of our youth, specifically the ones that I'm mentoring on Saturday mornings, that's what they're not in tune with. They're not in tune with their conscience. So they're out doing all these things, not recognizing the conscious level of consequences they're going to have to suffer because they're not tuned into that energy. So what we do is we help them be aware of, hey, did something ever kick into you and say you shouldn't have done that? Nope, never. I just, I'm going to do it till I get caught. Okay, well, let's unpack that. Is that really, what makes sense to you? Just keep doing bad things until you get caught. Like, what's your thought process there? And you challenge them to think. And you challenge them to get tied into that energy to ultimately be like, oh, yeah, that really didn't make a lot of sense. Like, but I never thought about that. Right. So once you're thinking now, you're tying into your energy. And once you're tying into your energy, you can't revert back because that energy is going to hold you accountable for your actions at a real-time level. So often as a Black community, we get frustrated when our politicians or police officers do something that's bad that our European counterparts do constantly. And what's the first thing out of our mouth? Well, we can't do what they do. That's all that same energy. We can't because our culture, our energy is developed at a higher level. And so we know we're not supposed to be doing certain things. Right. So subconsciously, when we say, well, we know we can't do what they do, we're recognizing that we as a culture have elevated to a level where we're not supposed to be doing those things. We're supposed to be doing differently. And we're holding ourselves accountable for that. Now, that's my elementary version of what Jarrod just said.
Oh, no, it was beautiful, brother.
Yeah, that was on point, Joe. Great. Just to add to that, it's interesting that one of the thoughts that I had is, and I've had this kind of maybe when I hit about 45 or so, I kind of had this epiphany of, we really don't have anything figured out as in our human form. We really don't have anything figured out overall. Now we do, and we act, and we do the work that we, have to do to survive and those kind of things. But as it relates to what we're born with, right? I believe, back to what you were talking about before, I think that we are all born with specific gifts that the Creator put in us and specific design. But what happens is as we move through life, there's all these other influences, and then there's also your own head, which you think when you think you got stuff figured out. But when you start to allow the universe to show you and listen, right? The spirit to show you and listen, you find your life moves you in the ways that you're supposed to go, and I think that part of what our young folks are challenged with is that they get so much noise coming at them from the outside world, right? Whether it's social media, whether it's, you name it, all these different influences, that they miss that piece of it, that piece that the universe has already said what you're supposed to do. It's already said what you're supposed to do. It's already telling you, trying to push you in a certain direction. But what happens is, again, our human form fights it all the time.
That's right.
Could you speak to that a little bit, Jarrod? Do you agree with that thought process?
Yeah, so as you were talking about it, it reminded me also, and I spoke a little bit about this on Monday. But when we looked at each other as beings, and I'm talking about us Black folk, and how this And I begin with us because we're the ones that influence the world in their thought. And they've only took a little piece of our understanding in order to create their entire literary corpus, their entire literature. And it's only a page from our book. Mm-hmm. And so again, we're talking about energy cultivation as an individual, as well as a community or a people, part to whole. As it relates to nature, how do I also relate to nature? How do we also relate to nature? And so Joe and I are alphas, and one of the things that W.B. Du Bois always talked about was the better making of men. And in the better making of men, and in our fraternity, one of the things that is always talked about is the cultivation and development of the college man. And so really our fraternity is about developing that young person in order to make them a mature and responsible and cultivated elder, so that everything that they do on the wisest level. And so one of our symbols is the Sphinx. And so I talked about the Sphinx the other day. The Sphinx sits facing the east. And so that lets you know about the Enlightenment. It faces the east in order to see the sun rising every day. But that Sphinx was created during the time period of what's the astrological sign during the sign of Leo. So during this 2,144 year period, at the beginning, when the stars aligned at a certain point to put everything in the sign of, I'm saying Leo, but it's really the sign of Heru. Leo is a European version of that. And so at that time, we began to produce that. So we had the head of a human who's facing the spirit of creation, enlightened, but had the body of what? An animal. So it was speaking that a human is three parts: an animal, a human, and a spirit. Those are the three parts really of a human. And we spoke to this the other day, that that we are really spirit or souls having a human experience. Yeah. And we experience things. So, and we named everything because we saw spirit in everything in nature. So we named, I'll say, if that tree has a certain spirit, but there's another tree, it has a different type of spirit than that tree. Our system began to name every bit and piece of how we interrelate with nature and how those natures has different types of energy. And then how do I relate with certain type of energies? And so that Sphinx reminds us that we have to subdue our animal nature. That's why the Sphinx is laid down sitting. And we have to raise the head, the human, and choose, which is our will, to choose spirit. So that's our free will. We freely choose always our rising energy, our rising spirit, our rising enlightenment and wisdom and knowledge. That's what we always choose. And so what you reminded me of is just to really speak to how we cultivated ourselves into creating a society to understand that me as an individual, I'm part of a whole. I'm a unique part of a whole that was made from creation. And some of us, and I get a curriculum from my society. So when you've heard it takes a village to raise a child, well, we know that when Joe was born and then the priest looked at Joe and did a divine and found out that Joe is returned as Shango, and that when Marty returned as Ogun, Mary returned as Oshun, Nancy returned as Yemonja. We knew each one of you all needed your own curriculum. And so we named you per your energy, right? And then we would treat you based upon that energy. So I'm a little tougher on Ogun, Marty, because you need more toughness because you already are endowed with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you like a Mike Tyson. You have this war-like energy that's in some of us. You know, where a Marty was, you know, more diplomatic, still fire, still leader. But, you know, we need him to lead. We always need the person who's over war to lead like that. So we need a different type of energy. The Yemonja, we need nurturing in a community. Who nurtures? Who does that? And the Oshun, who brings joy and love, and teaches us joy and love through how she expresses herself. Mm-hmm. And so, so again, our spirituality, our spiritual system was very elaborate and very comprehensive. And it ensured that we all had to learn our curriculum that was unique to us and our class of people. And then we all had to learn in the diversity of who we were, how to work together, how to be collaborative in our society. And that's what made our society so unique, untouched for thousands upon thousands of years. And remember, everybody else invaded us. We didn't go invading other people.
Right.
Mm. Our rules were different. Even the first European explorers and other explorers, when they came to Africa, they talked about how safe, how no crime was evident. It taught you about our societies in a particular way. Dr. Clark also talked about we had no name for jail. Because no one ever built one, and for a reason, you know, and that certain crimes just didn't happen. Not that it was a perfect utopian society, because somebody's going to hear that and think it's utopia. Nah, you still had a harsh life to live because of the discipline that it required from you. But the society forced your cultivation and maturity in that. And so that you could mature and become the better making of a man and the better making of a human. So your society pushed humanity in the making of you and pushed spirit in the creation and making of you. Where other societies rely more on how can I get more material, our societies dealt with how can we cultivate you to become a better being. And therefore, your whole system, this deals with what capitalism is, this deals with what socialism is.
And now I think that sums up where we are as a society. Why we have such an internal struggle when we want to chase the bag and do all these things, because really that's not who we are. That's who society has wanted us to become. But Brother Jarrod, that's what an amazing summary, man. Like that said a whole lot about even our political infrastructure, you know, and why we don't fit in it. No,
it's very hard for us. If you've ever watched, did you see Game of Thrones?
I did, yeah.
I mean, I love Game of Thrones. I thought it was one of the best TV. That and The Wire, the best TV ever.
Right.
That's a hell of a combination.
Oh,
right.
And they're uniquely different.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
But the Game of Thrones teaches you about European society.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, their value system for sure.
It would be hard for us to get used to those society and the rules of that society, those society, because it was so inhumane, so violent, right? I love hearing this verbiage where people like to say one of the first jobs, the first careers is prostitution. Well, that only happens in an imbalanced, unequal society.
Right,
You
right.
didn't have that. You weren't selling yourself in our societies like that.
Yep.
And so that just didn't occur. And it's hard for people to understand that because we live in the reality of today and we know and see that, and it's normalized in what we see today. And it's hard for us to understand. Another version of that, but Dr. Clark went to, talks about when Queen Nzinga, who was leader of Angola, modern day Angola. And of course, her fight for over 40 years against the Portuguese, the ebb and flow of winning and compromising with the Portuguese was ongoing. Well, she went to, he talks about her going to Portugal. I'm still trying to find this information so I can, quote from the direct source, so I'm getting it secondarily. And he talks about how when she went into Portugal, she saw squalor, she saw hunger, she saw people living on the streets. And to her mind, she couldn't even, because the Portuguese there in her country was giving off a false impression of who and what they were. And her impression was, people are hungry, people are without. That could not happen. She's like, that couldn't happen in our country. That's not, I can't even fathom a person being hungry or without. If a person is hungry or without, an individual, it means the entire community is. And so what you're getting at, and there's a book that Mama Marimba had me read some time ago, by one of my favorite authors by the name of Armand. It's called The Healers. And that book really teaches you about African social construction. And that when it was interfered with, how in the beginning, how that interference began to change and create a social pathology of disease through the society. And then people began doing new and different things, which that was the true disease. I'm not talking about a physical disease. I'm talking about a social and cultural disease. And so,
which we see today,
which is heir apparent, and now is what we are. So it's been normalized in such a way that we don't realize that we have been relegated to this animal, material, and physical level of being, And so I can't, just my last point to that is I can't, it's not about the religions per se, because even my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, my grandfather, they were Christian. But they practice in a different way that's looking for humanity. I know my people, the folks I know who are in these religions, even if you're in Islam, they're looking for a higher understanding of humanity and expression. And so, which is different from what others utilize it for. Typically, they're utilizing it for power. Right. And control and influence, which is different.
It's funny, one of the things, and as we get ready to close, one other point, just to Jarrod's point, all these amazing points made. I often thought about Jarrod leaving Catholicism, right? Because I have so many struggles with so many of their messages and points. And I said, you know what? That's like being a good police officer and leaving the force because you're surrounded by bad cops. Like, you do better from the inside because you actually have the opportunity to change from within. And I did, man. I stayed home. I stayed in my Catholicism, and I've been relatively successful in talking to them about some of the things they need to be critical of. Your point in looking for the humanity in things, right? So just like I'm critical on education and why are we teaching the Trail of Tears, Manifest Destiny? If we're going to teach that, we need to be teaching from a critical perspective. Like, this is what we did, wasn't good. Here's why we did it, but this is what we did. I say the same thing all the time with Catholicism and my brothers and sisters who teach it about the Crusades. Like, why do we brag on that? Like, why do we brag about the Crusades? Really, this is what y'all have been bragging about for 2,000 years, that this is what Constantine did. Do you understand that's why Constantine will never be a saint? Like, do you understand like how horrible that was, what we did? And I'm not saying don't talk about it. I'm not saying maybe it didn't, the ends justify the means. I won't agree with that, but maybe that's your perspective. But regardless, you got to teach it from a critical perspective because it wasn't right. It wasn't right. It may have been the right thing to do at that time if you feel. And of course, we're going to judge from a historical context where we are now. But at some point, you still have to recognize it still wasn't right, you know, even if it was the right thing for right then. So I appreciate your points, man, and looking for the humanity in all that we do and the energy and all the amazing points you made, brother, man. You and Paul, man, continue to help me grow on my own journey, man. I appreciate y'all.
I share them.
Yeah, shit.
Now I ain't buying no more books, you tell me, last thing. Every book you tell me to buy, I get it in here and I'm reading it. Next thing you know, she done took the book and she reading it. I'm like, I can't keep a book, man. They are so good. She took the whole conscious level, high conscious book and she halfway through it. Like, you have some great recommendations of books. And if there's anything else you want to offer on this call, man, feel free to suggest some of the books that you told me because they have been very good, man.
Okay.
And to that point, that's something that we're going to be working on the Black Man Lab website, is because so often, and you know, yeah, you're absolutely right, Joe. Jarrod is one of those scholarly brothers that can, you know, rattle off books off the top of his head.
Man, yes.
And you know, snippets from each of those books. So,
right.
But there's so many brothers that are like that, that have given us some really good books, and I want to make sure that we have some sort of place to hold those names of those books. So I'm going to try to figure out how we have that on the website and send people that way whenever we have these kinds of discussions that can help to, you know, open somebody's thought processes up a bit, you know, and they can do some studying, if you will.
Exactly.
One other thing I was going to say is that you know, it's interesting that when you look at the historical side of what Jarrod was just talking about, you look at the historical side of religion and how the various cultures have made decisions to, I don't want to say necessarily bastardize the original, what we know to be original thought processes around religion and spirituality. But I'll use that word just because I don't have another one to come up with. Those different bastardizations wind up making it into this competitive environment around something that is built on really spirituality and love, right? That's what the spirit speaks to. But yeah, we wind up talking about my religion is better than your religion, or you know, back to your point, Joe, you go back to the Crusades. We're fighting over religion. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Right. Exactly.
And it still happens today. It still happens today.
It still is happening right now.
Yeah, I was at a funeral. This is a few years back, and the pastor in the funeral, for whatever reason, he went, rather than talking about the woman who was in the casket, he went on this rant about other religions. And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. And I thought to myself then, this is diametrically opposed to what the spirit of religion is supposed to be all about, right?
Yeah.
Because to the point of Monday, we had three different perspectives, but yet everybody had the same points of view, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I don't know where is that divide and how do we overcome it is a question that I guess is just going to sit out there. But it's unfortunate because when you have that higher level of understanding, totally changes the way you operate.
Definitely.
Totally changes.
Definitely.
Y'all talk about the Crusades, but the Crusades was based upon a lie.
Exactly.
The other thing is, of course, it's also dealing with power and who was going to be in control of the minds of the people. The Europeans were doing it through their form of Christianity, and who they were fighting against, of course, were the Arabs of that time, in seeking to control Jerusalem, and therefore to be able to control the people, because information, your system of information, which religion is, that system of information means that the entire people will be up under the control or the influence of that particular information system. And so it was important to be able to control these people. And so that's why it was also important to control us in whipping us into both of these religions. We forget about the thousands of about 1,000 years of Arab enslavement, that we were enslaved by the Arab, and the 500 years by the European, and that all of North Africa was taken from the African under the auspices of Islam. And so, and of course, the facilitation of Christianity as the mechanism of power over us as African people. And so these are critical in trying to understand, why do people try to take us back from our own original creation and making? Because it empowers us in an entire different way. Our civilizations were spiritually based. Our political system was spiritually based, not religiously based, but spiritually based. And it's what empowered us to make some of the greatest civilizations ever known to mankind.
No, nothing to dispute there. We are at the time limit. Yes, Jarrod, sir. Man, your points have been just phenomenal, man. I appreciate it as always. My continued growth from listening to you, man. Marty, you want to get us to get out of here?
Oh, yeah. He wanted me to tell you two things, Marty. 12 Steps to Higher Consciousness. That's the one that helps you deal with by Kenneth Keys. It helps folks really deal with choosing your higher virtues versus your higher nature versus your lower nature. I already said The Healers by Armand is a great book. When you get deep and really begin to study, if you want to know the origins of things, since I brought that out, the book by Coming Forth by Day and by Night. It's an Egyptian text by Wallace D. Budge, and it will help your entry into understanding any biblical anything for the most part. But it's a thick, and you really have to be ready to study once you get on it. So.
I used to feel that way about the destruction of black
civilization.
Yeah.
But now,
by one of your professors, Chancellor Williams.
Chancellor Williams. And I used to feel that way about it because it was a textbook for us. And then thereafter, years later, when I revisited it, it just became a good point of reference for me. So those kind of books, although they may be big, they have a lot of great information in them. I'm gonna say this, Jarrod, you are a poli-sci professor, right?
Yes, sir.
And I imagine you drop these kind of gems on your poli-sci student. I mean, that has to be interesting. I would love to come sit in on one of your classes one day. Just
absolutely,
just to watch you.
Students give great feedback, and I love the truth. But yeah. that they bring.
Dope, man. That's dope. Beautiful, man. Well, look, man, we're up against it, man. The bewitching hour has gotten here, but I am so glad that we were able to have this conversation again, and dig a little deeper. As I said before, I said this on Monday, and since then I've been saying it, is that this is one of those topics that we have to continue to unpack and continue to figure out how our young folks, especially today, are getting some of this ingrained in them, because it'll change the paradigm of the rest of their life, not to mention change the paradigm of our communities.
Right.
That the stuff that we're seeing going on right now, the only thing, I think really the only thing is our folks like us being able to wrap our arms around these people, the young folks that are out there, but then also them finding a level of spirituality within themselves and change their whole thought process. And so that's just my 2 cents. Anyway, let's close out like we always do, brothers. Who wants to lead? You want to lead us, Joe? You've been missing. You want to lead us?
Nah, I'm not, man. No way I'm gonna leave that when I got you two brothers on here. Nah, y'all strong as hell.
Come on, man. All right, I'll drop it, man. I'm a link in this chain.
I'm a link in
this chain.
And it won't break here.
And it won't break here.
I'm a link in this chain.
I'm a link in this chain.
And it won't break here.
And it won't break here.
We are links in this chain.
We
are
links in this chain.
And we won't break here.
And we won't break here.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Hey, man. I love y'all, man.
Love y'all, man. Appreciate it, Jarrod.
Thank
you, Mark, to producer Mark. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, Mark Lawson, our super producer, the man behind the scenes. Keeps
Thanks, brother Mark.
And Marty, keep up the great work, brother.
We'll keep pushing, y'all.
All right. Mind up, brothers.
All right.